The 2004 movie King Arthur is a historical adventure film which brands itself on being the untold true story that inspired the legend. It has an epic soundtrack composed by Hans Zimmer and visually stunning fight scenes. But how truthful to the legend is King Arthur? To begin with, it's only fair to point out that the film's storyline is not taken from the traditional sources, but is a work of creative fiction, and is unusual in reinterpreting Arthur as a Roman officer rather than that of a typical medieval knight. The producers of the film attempted to market it as a more historical accurate version of the Arthurian legends, supposedly inspired by new archaeological findings. In the film, Arthur's father was a Roman general from the Imperial Roman army, and his mother a Celtic woman. In the historical notes of the legend, Arthur's father is Uther Pendragon, a famous Romano-British commander and one of Britain's earlier kings, and his mother is Igraine, a beautiful young woman who was once wife of the Duke of Cornwall and one of Uther's loyal subjects. The film is set in 467 AD and portrayed as the end of Roman Britain, with the legions withdrawing. In reality, this was completed in the year 410, nearly 60 years before. Some count the Dark Ages as beginning in sub-Roman Britain after the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustus, who was deposed in 476 AD, 9 years after the date for the setting of the film. The current Roman emperor in the film's time would have been Anthemius. The movie's characterisation of Arthur's knights strays from the Arthurian legend. For example, the film's portrayal of Bors as boorish and lusty, the father of many children, differs greatly from his namesake, whose virtue and celibacy allowed him to witness the Holy Grail according to the legend. The cinematic portrayal of Bors is therefore much closer to the traditional depiction of Sir Kay than his legendary namesake. Lancelot and Galahad are portrayed as similar ages, whereas according to traditional versions, they are father and son.
Where's my Gilly? Gilly, you've been fighting?
Yes.
You've been winning?
Yes.
That's my boy. Come on, all my other bastards.
The film portrays Lancelot, Tristan, Bors and the other knights of the Round Table as Sarmatian knights fighting for the glory of the Roman Empire. In historical accounts, the Knights of the Round Table are Britons, knights of Romano-Celtic Britain fighting for the freedom of Britain against the Saxons. A round table is briefly present in the movie, whereas in legend Arthur's knights would regularly meet in equality.
His Eminence, Bishop Gnaeus Germanus.
A round table. What sort of evil is this?
Arthur says for men to be men, they must first all be equal.
The cinematic portrayal of Guinevere as a Celtic warrior who joins Arthur's knights in battle is a drastic alteration from the damsel in distress of Arthurian legend. Although there is historical and mythological precedents for warrior queens, such as the British Boudica of the Iceni, the film's portrayal of Guinevere is closer to the Queen Medb of the Irish. No sources, early or late, describes Guinevere as either a warrior or a Celt. In fact, in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae, which contains one of the oldest accounts of the character, Guinevere has Roman blood, while Arthur is an indigenous Celt. Despite the alleged historical angle of the film, with the character Merlin, he was not originally part of the legends, and it is generally agreed that Merlin was based on two figures, Myronid the Wild and Aurelius Ambrosius, a highly fictionized version of the historical war leader Ambrosius Aurelianus. The former had nothing to do with Arthur and flourished after the Arthurian period. The compound of Merlin was created by Geoffrey of Monmouth. The film also replaces the traditional sword in the stone story with a darker and more tragic backstory of how Arthur claimed his sword Excalibur. The movie wrongly describes the Picts as being called woads. This word is a reference to one plant the Picts used to make blue paint. However, the use of woad by the Picts is questioned by scholars, and the historical Picts were never known by this name. Also questionable is the movie's portrayal of armour, or lack of it. Historically, Dalmatians were armoured in the manner of cataphracts, in full-length coats of scale armour, while the film's Dalmatians are armoured in a mishmash of pseudo-Roman, Turkish, Mongol and Hunnic design. The Saxons are shown attacking Hadrian's Wall from the north, though by 467 the Saxons were already occupying parts of Britain far south of the wall. The movie builds to the climactic Battle of Badon Hill, where Arthur, aided by Guinevere and her Celts, defeat a Saxon army, after which Arthur and Guinevere marry, and Merlin proclaims Arthur as King of the Britons. Historically, the first mention of the battle is by the monk Gildas in his account called On the Ruin and Conquest of Britain, written in the early to mid-6th century. In it, the Anglo-Saxons are said to have dipped their red and savage tongues in the Western Ocean, before Ambrosius Aurelianus organised a British resistance with the survivors of the initial Saxon onslaught, but there is no mention of an Arthur. The earliest surviving text specifically mentioning Arthur in connection with the battle is the early 9th century History of the Britons, attributed to the Welsh monk Ninninus, in which the soldier Arthur is identified as the leader of the victorious British force at Badon. The account of Ninninus says, "The 12th battle was on Mount Badon, in which there fell in one day 960 men, from one charge by Arthur, and no one struck them down except Arthur himself." The legend of King Arthur as we know it can trace its origins to Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of British Kings, completed in 1138, which contains the first narrative account of Arthur's life. This work is an imaginative and fanciful account of British kings. The movie King Arthur offers an alternative to the legend by omitting aspects we associate with the legend, like the sword in the stone, the Holy Grail, Lancelot's romance with Guinevere, the Round Table, and Arthur's Camelot. But in truth, King Arthur may just be a legend, based upon a number of people, and what the movie does is simply offer an alternative to the legend.